Hi, I'm Tim, and welcome to Watch You Want. Thanks for logging on. Today we have a little bit of something old and something new. Now, some of this hardware you've seen on the channel before, but in this format, a comparison, it's a bit of a novelty. I don't do too many comparisons on the channel because for the most part I like to let each watch be the star of its own feature, but when I have two watches that are both from the sports segment, with similar complications, similar size, similar aesthetics, and similar target market, I really feel like that's a great opportunity to compare and contrast. Basically unpack what makes each watch special and what makes each one distinct. And today we have the Breitling Chronomat B04 GMT 44mm in stainless steel, and on my right we have the Omega Seamaster Aqua Terra 150M Chronograph GMT, also 44mm in stainless steel. Now I'm going to start with the Breitling because this one's a little bit more familiar to channel viewers, having already been through the drill and had its own spotlight feature. But I want to just highlight this because it's an important reference in the Breitling catalog, and it's part of the generation of chronomats that emerged from the in-house manufacture development. Of course, 2009, Breitling debuts its B01 caliber, its first entirely in-house chronograph caliber in the modern era. It's a big deal because that represents Breitling's cutting of the cord, so to speak, from Mother ETA, upon which it was dependent for movements since time immemorial. Also, as a member of the Chronomat family, it's part of the modern tradition established in 1982 as really the resurrection watch that helped lift Breitling out of bankruptcy, and in the Snyder family era of ownership, it has been the top-selling family of Breitling watches, above even the Super Ocean and the better-known Navitimer. So, naturally, the Chronomat family received both the B01, the first in-house caliber chronograph movement, and the B04, the first in-house chronograph GMT movement. This watch features a full high-polish case, high-polish bezel, high-polish pilot bracelet. It's really an impressive piece. Now in the flesh, and I'm going to do a wrist shot of both of these, you can see on the wrist it has all of the characteristics of the Chronomat. Full polish. You can see the rider tabs, a signature of the model, are a little bit subdued on this one. Now they're still there, but they're lower in profile, they're less pronounced. They don't break up the aesthetic of the watch. They aren't disruptive, they're complementary. And you can see that even the signature Breitling bezel bolts that hold the bezel to the watch, they're actually countersunk, recessed into the bezel. They're far more subdued. This is a more elegant, refined, this is, I believe, a more versatile look for the big Breitling sports watch, simply because it is a little bit more discreet in the way those technical features are expressed. The dial is something special. It's a metallic brown soleil, so it's got radiating sunburst patterns from the center outward, but there are a lot of subtle details. A cantilevered tachymeter scale that reaches out over the underlying soleil pattern dial. Now the watch does feature a GMT function and a chronograph, as well as a date window. Neither one of these watches, I should mention, features a traditional quickset, so you have to advance the local time hour hand independently, rapidly around the dial to get the watch to where you want it to be. But I believe the utility of having an independent second time zone really obviates the inconvenience, or at least compensates for the inconvenience of having to manually reset the date on occasion. Both of these watches feature above average power reserve. In the B04 in-house caliber from Breitling, it's actually 72 hours, so a good 3 days. If you wanted to take this watch off for whatever reason on a Friday night, assuming full wind, it would still be beating on Monday. Now, additional details of the dial include polished chapter rings around the subdials, contrasting subdials, and a very subtle, sort of etched out rectangular form in a darker guilloche brown at center. And you can see how you can sort of see the, I'm going to try to, there, I think that angle really brings it out to good effect. And it's partly framed by the shaping of the applied indexes, so you can see how there is essentially a rectilinear form within the circular form of the dial. Adds visual interest, adds a dimension to that vast real estate, and between that, the cantilevered tachymeter scale, the different tones, and the elegant integration of that red highlighted second time zone hand, this is very cohesive, interesting, never busy, highly technical, but not crowded. Breitling did a good job with the aesthetic of this watch. Now my wrist is 6 1/3 inches, 16 centimeters, so you can see how it sits, and it sits fairly thick. It's 17 millimeters top to bottom, from the top of the domed crown to the case back, so it's going to be touch and go, pardon the pilot reference and the pilot pun with a Breitling, whether this one is going to fit under your dress cuff or a long sleeve. I would say in general, long sleeves, yes. Any kind of tighter dress cuffs, anything that's buttoned down, probably not. but the watch is exceptionally versatile, and you've got all the hallmarks of the Chronomat from Breitling. It's a very distinctive line within a very distinctive manufacturer. So between the high polish, the rider tabs, the bezel bolts, and the onion crown, this is an exceptionally distinctive watch with a personality all of its own. And thanks to the B04 movement, it's really got a mechanical identity and a pedigree that's all its own. This is an advanced, modern movement that's going to be the foundation of most Breitling calibers long into the future, very rugged, contemporary, with a long power reserve, and COSC chronometer certified as always. This watch is a beauty inside and out. Now I'm going to draw some distinctions right here. You'll notice when we move to the Omega, it's got a bidirectional rotating 24-hour bezel. Now historically, when you have a GMT watch, you can use a bidirectional rotating bezel to calculate either a second or a third time zone, depending on whether or not the 24-hour hand can be set independently. On the Breitling, it kind of splits the difference between a dive watch and a GMT. Rated to 200 meters, this one features a unidirectional bezel, and you can see the calibration is 0 to 60 minutes with a loomed dot at the index. So this is actually intended for timing, specifically for dive timing. The 24-hour calibration is actually on the dial itself. And you'll notice that the Omega, which sits right here, features the 24-hour bezel calibration of a traditional GMT. So if you wanted to, you could time a third time zone on the Omega, and on the Breitling, because you have that 60-minute calibration between the chronograph and the bezel, you could simultaneously time two separate intervals of up to an hour, up to 12 hours with the chronograph, up to 1 hour with the dive bezel. So this gives you the ability to time two separate intervals. This gives you the ability to calculate up to 3 separate time zones on demand. Here you can see bidirectional. Now, also worth noting is the different fashion in which the clasps function. The Breitling Pilot is very robust. It is a clamshell open and shut type, just like so. The Omega, likewise very robust, features a double trigger deployant, and that's the distinction there. You may favor one or the other depending on your experience. Personally, I favor the trigger, but the Breitling leaves nothing to be desired in terms of security or solidity. So now we've looked at the Breitling. I also want to draw another distinction while we have the watches up like this. The Omega features a display caseback, the Breitling a solid caseback. There are some prices you pay with the Omega for the convenience of the non-screw-down pushers. It does have 50 meters less water resistance rating, and because it does have that sapphire display back, those two facts mitigate against its depth rating. This is 150 meters, this is 200 meters. If you plan to do a lot of high-impact aquatic activity, you're going to want the Breitling with the solid caseback and the screw-down pushers. Just a little bit more security, just a little bit more of a buffer in case the hydrostatic shock, or you've fallen off your jet ski, or you jump from the high dive. You're going to want that extra buffer if you do intend to wear your mechanical watch in water. Now, talking about the Omega here, both of these watches feature 44mm stainless steel cases, but where the Omega really sets itself apart is in the amount of contrasting finish. It is both a brushed and a polished case, and it's a little bit more complex in that the lugs are heavily beveled in the Omega Seamaster and Speedmaster tradition, so you have these polished beveled shoulders, and then you have a brushed case flank with contrasting polished pushers and a satin crown. You also have, for want of a better word, a little bit more of a pared down or a paired case. Although it's 44mm, you can see that on my wrist, again 6 1/3 inches, 16 centimeters, the Omega wears a little bit smaller. This does not feel like a 44mm sports watch. I would say the Breitling wears true to size. The Omega, I would say, wears a little bit smaller, more like a 42. It also sits lower at about 15mm. It's got a little bit more of a fighting chance of clearing a tight cuff. I would not say either one of these is particularly long sleeve friendly, but if you're going to go with a dress outfit, something with long sleeves, the Omega is your better bet in that respect. Also, because the bezel is more heavily canted, it's got a little bit more of a chance of perhaps allowing a sleeve to ride up and over it. The brushed look of the bracelet and the case flanks is a bit more subdued, and combined with the anodized, that is a PVD, not ceramic bezel for reference, but combined with the blackened look of the bezel, the watch is just a little bit more formal for a dress apparel, and I feel like if you're going to wear a dress ensemble, this is the one to go with. And the dial itself has a distinctive trait just as much as the Breitling, but this one is called Teak Concept. You can see that there is a biplanar dial feature where the 0 to 60 minute and second calibration around the edge is actually on a lower plane, and then the center inboard of the applied indexes has this vertical striation, almost like a pinstripe. But what Omega is trying to evoke here with this Aqua Terra GMT model is the decking, the teak decking of a vintage yacht. So it has that elegant striated form, and it's just going for contrast in the same sense as that rectilinear form in the center of the Breitling contrasts with the rounded shape of the dial and the bezel overall. This vertical linear striation contrasts with the rounded form of those same bezel and dial elements. A different kind of contrast. It works just as well in my opinion. Each one is well executed, beautifully detailed, and that holds up under a loop. This is purely down to personal taste. Now the Omega does have an interesting movement. This is the caliber 3603. It is exclusive to Omega. It is based on the Frederic Piguet flyback chronographs. This one has a vertical clutch column wheel. So does the Breitling B04. The distinction here is that this one is coaxial. That's an innovation Omega introduced a generation ago, still exclusive to their watches. Both of them are chronometer certified, and you can expect a similar degree of accuracy from each. The distinction here is purely between the larger feel and aesthetic, the somewhat more flamboyant look of the high-polished Breitling, the somewhat more subdued, more pared-down look of the Omega. Each one is a capable chronograph with a useful second time zone and a date function. Each one features a movement that's either entirely in-house or exclusive to the brand in the case of the Omega. There's a lot of utility here, and because sports watches generally are accepted as formal watches today, provided they're not, tutti-frutti Hublots, each one is exceptionally versatile in terms of the attire it can accompany. Short of the need to clear a very tight dress cuff, either one of these watches is welcome in any occasion and well suited to it. Both of these watches are comprehensively equipped with factory manuals, papers, and accessories. See them on our website, Watch You Want, and decide for yourself. Will it be Breitling or will it be Omega? I'm Tim, and thanks for logging on.